Hey guys, welcome back to the High Performance Living podcast. This is episode 64. Coming your way on this week's show then, I'm joined by fellow coach and author Mike Matthews, and we're diving into the wonderful world that is carb cycling. That's right, this nutrition strategy has definitely become a hot topic over the last number of years, and it's definitely a question I get almost on a weekly basis. Roo, should I have high carb days, low carb days, and of course, those dreaded no-carb days. So carb cycling, like many of the other modern protocols like we've touched on in the podcast, like fasting and paleo, goes against that traditional nutrition and dieting advice. So tradition tells us that we can only build muscle or lose fat, and never at the same time. Then carb cycling came along, and it was sold to us as that ultimate method for rapid fat loss while still building muscle. Therefore, Mike and I are going to dive into all about carb cycling and ultimately whether or not this is true and if it's something you should be using. So coming your way, we're going to be looking at what carb cycling is, how does it work exactly, and of course, the benefits and negatives to it. So enjoy this week's show, guys, and let me know what you think of it by leaving a rating and reviews. It's hugely appreciated. See you, as always, on the other side. All right, guys, so as promised, I should have Mike Matthews on the other end of the line. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks, man.
Yep, keeping busy?
Yes, another day, another lot of work.
I initially came across your work, Mike, when I was Googling. This is part of your SEO now. When I was Googling around about carb cycling. And I run a nutrition course for personal trainers. So I was putting together some information and seeing what was generally out there in the big bad world of Google on carb cycling. And there was so much rubbish that we come across around carb cycling, and something I'm looking forward to getting stuck into with yourself. It's held as that holy grail and ultimate way to build more muscle and strip the fat off. And
it's the secret to the recomp.
Like it's the secret to the recomp. And from this, then we've seen multiple, products and books coming out that keep trying to resell us this promise time and time again. And, I was trying to put some real information and science and, the studies behind whether or not this is actually true. And your article and your information there on your website stood out a mile compared to everything else there. And it's kind of breaking it down on a realistic idea as what it actually will do for us and who it might be suited for. So I thought, it's fantastic to have you onto the podcast, mate, and hopefully we can hash out some of those ideas that I think we'll both find that we agree on. First up then, there's, my listeners here in the UK may not be familiar with what you get up to, mate, and sort of day-to-day stuff. What's your general background and, what you doing? You're coaching people, you're writing and stuff like that. Give us a bit more info.
Yeah, I mean, I stumbled into the fitness author and if you're going to say guru, I guess I kind of hate that word, but it wasn't my intention. Actually, I published. I grew up playing sports and I got into weightlifting when I was a teenager, and didn't get serious about my weightlifting really until I was in my mid-20s. Like really, actually, seriously start to educate myself on more on the because when I got into weightlifting, I was 17, 18 maybe. And I did magazine workouts, and I knew I didn't really know, I wasn't taking it seriously enough to really know much about what I was doing, other than my friends and I would do workouts, and, we thought that we were pretty good with our, 185-pound bench press and stuff like that. And so I did that for years and kind of got into the habit of it. And I had gotten to, after about like 6 years of weightlifting consistently, my body just didn't look that impressive. I wasn't very strong. I had put on some size, obviously. I mean, I had stuck with it at least, and I would show up to the gym and I would do these long traditional bodybuilder type of workouts, right? Where you're like doing a bunch of high rep stuff and supersets and drop sets and isolation work and, these 2-hour kind of marathon workouts every day. Had the time to do that back then. And, but given how much time I was putting into it, I wasn't getting very much in the way of results. After 6 years, maybe I had put on, 30 pounds of muscle, which is not very impressive for 6 years, and built a little bit of strength, but I was still pretty weak. I mean, at a body weight of like 200, 205 pounds, I remember I used to struggle to bench 245 for just reps. So, that was on a Smith machine too. So, And my squat was pathetic as well. On a Smith, I think I was squatting about the same. I never even had really deadlifted before because that was never really an exercise that I had come across. And I worked with a bunch of trainers over the years and did every type of workout I could find in magazines and such, and rarely ever was deadlifting because it just wasn't, I used to think it was like a dangerous exercise and it's bad for your back and bad for everything. So after all that, I had basically kind of decided that I wanted to actually learn a bit more about how muscle building actually works, the physiology of it, not reading magazine articles, but really kind of, because I've always been a good student, and when I want to learn something, I just dive into it and figure it out. I just hadn't really applied myself to health and fitness. And so when I started to go in that direction, I started to read. I went just mainly went into the literature and started reading a lot of the papers that are there's Schoenfeld, how do you pronounce his last name? Actually,
Schoenfield, I think.
Schoenfield. So, there are a handful of researchers where you can they're good launching points for going out and reading, a lot of other valuable studies. Now, part of that problem though is, and it would have been if I didn't also have the experience side of it, and I run into this where you have people that are kind of like PubMed type warriors where they get lost in the theory, and you can kind of make an argument especially with training, you can make almost any argument you want that's not just absurd and back it up with some sort of research. So you have to also have the personal experience side, and I was fortunate to have I had met one guy in particular, and then he introduced me to a couple other guys who were big mainly into powerlifting. He was one guy in particular. He used to do bodybuilding, and then he got into powerlifting. And although he was said at the time that he was natural, and I didn't really know. Now I know what to look for, and there's no way that he was natural. But he had good advice for me. Which is, in terms of the training side of things, emphasizing heavy compound lifting over all the isolation stuff I was doing, how to work out training frequency, how to set that up properly so you're not undertraining or overtraining. Just kind of like he had a lot of good advice for me on programming your workouts for a natural weightlifter, even though he wasn't natural himself, which is kind of unusual because that's one of the big disservices that guys on drugs that they do to people that they give advice to is if they don't know how to, if they don't know what you can get away with and how far you can go as a natural weightlifter. If they just go, hey, this is what I do, that's not going to work for natural weightlifters. Because when guys are on drugs, you go that's where actually a lot of high rep stuff is good, and you got to watch out with the real heavy lifting because your tendons and ligaments aren't going to keep up with your muscle growth. That's why guys on drugs get hurt a lot. You get shoulder injuries and just mainly joint injuries and tendon ligament injuries and so forth. So I got pointed in the right direction, and read a fair amount of books as well, stuff like Starting Strength and Ripto's other books, and was putting it into use in the gym and really changed my training methodology. No more magazine workouts, no more traditional hypertrophy type of workouts, but more of I guess you could say a power bodybuilding style of training, where I was really just focusing on increasing. Like what I really wanted to see was getting stronger over time, and particularly on my squat, deadlift, my pressing, bench press, military press, and yeah, that's really like the big upper and lower body lifts. Seeing those numbers go up over time, and then treating the other exercises that I was doing as not as unimportant, but they were almost accessory to those core lifts, and making sure that I'm getting strong with those core lifts. And then also along the way, learning that dieting is just a numbers game. There's so much bad advice out there about dieting, which we can get into in the carb cycling. It's, clean eating has its heart in the right place. It's almost like a cult, the clean eating, where people that, they get an anxiety attack if they eat, if they break and have a couple handfuls of something that has sugar or something like that. Yeah. And so seeing that work and getting really lean for the first time, because, at that 6 to 7 year mark, I was like 205 pounds, maybe 16-17% body fat. And so I wasn't fat, but no one would look at me and be like, oh, damn, I want to look like that guy. And I was just like, oh yeah, whatever. Some dude that's kind of big. So, getting lean for the first time, getting down to 7-8%, and just seeing how easy it is when you know what you're doing. And so that was kind of my experiences. And then people that knew me were asking, hey, how'd you do it? And I would just explain the same things that I had learned: training, diet. It's kind of like, out of all the possible things that you could learn, you only really need to know 20% of all the random stuff you could know to get 80% of the results, type of thing. And I felt that I had kind of collected up that 20%. And it was pretty easy to pass on to other people. And then other people that I knew, they were having good results as well. And then people started telling me I should write a book, because I also was interested in writing. And that kind of coincided nicely with Kindle's KDP platform at the time. This was in 2012 when I published my first book. So around that time, 2011 is when KDP's Kindle, that's like Kindle's self-publishing platform,
Sure.
was really starting to gain media attention, because I think the first person that I had heard about it was a writer named it's probably just a pen name, but John Locke, and he was the first dude to sell 1 million books on Kindle, and I think he sells them for 99 cents or something. But it just was it was this big thing, like, hey, look, you can actually make a living just writing books and just publishing them yourself. And so that sounded kind of interesting to me. So I wrote Bigger, Leaner, Stronger and put that up, and didn't really know if anybody would care. And because I had a job and I was working, I just did it on my nights and on my weekends, like on my outside of work time. And I think maybe 10 people bought it in the first month or something like that. Maybe it was 5, I don't know. And I was just like, oh, that's cool, somebody bought it. And then maybe I think it was 20 to 25 in the next month, and then 40 in the next month. And I was like, oh shit, it's growing exponentially. And then it actually really started to pick up. And so by the end of I started writing the next book, and just thought there was an opportunity there, and that people liked what I had to say, and it worked. People put it into use. It's when you know what you're doing in the gym, and when you know what you're doing with your diet, it doesn't take long to see noticeable changes, which is nice. People can, they don't have to put much faith in what I say, because they can just go put it into use and, give it 4 weeks. And if you don't notice any differences or any improvements in 4 weeks, then okay, fine. But it's just I'm not asking much, you know what I mean? Yeah. And of course, I cite a lot of research in my writing, and I do a lot of research, and I have now, I've worked with thousands of people, so I can guarantee that I can give results to anybody. But even as somebody that, new, just coming across my book, don't know anything about me, it's nice to know that it doesn't, this is not a, it's kind of like the difference of a multivitamin versus a pre-workout, right? So a multivitamin, you may not notice anything. You're kind of taking it on the hope that it's going to improve your overall health and it's going to improve longevity, but you're not going to feel it. Whereas a pre-workout, you're going to feel it. So it's kind of like the information, you can either use it and you're going to, some things you don't really notice a change, or you're trying to tell yourself that there's a change, or you put something into use and there's no question, you know what I mean? Like your pants are now fitting looser. You've added 20 pounds to your bench press in a month. You're feeling better than you've ever had before. So then by the end of 2012, I decided that this was a real opportunity, and I was going to make it my full-time work, and started putting together my website, Muscle for Life. And I didn't put it on myself. I obviously paid somebody to do it, but started, working on that, and then launched it in March of 2013. And, kind of haven't looked back from there. And now I'm kind of involved in a lot of different things, but that's the long story short, I guess.
Nice, mate. Fantastic story and fantastic journey so far. And actually runs parallel, mate. Very parallel to myself. I was the same. I was a bit of a lost young lad trying to beef up a little bit, get a bit stronger in the gym, and followed all that magazine rubbish, and, followed the gurus in the gym and the gurus on the forums who were telling me to, do X, Y, and Z. That just made me looking and feeling even worse than I previously ever was. And it actually led me to getting overweight in the process. And I actually topped over 200 pounds myself at one stage. And now I'm 170 pounds. So there was something went wrong along those lines. And it was actually through my own sort of transformation and putting a little bit of information out there about my own journey that people latched onto and wanted to know more. And I did exactly the same. I was actually used to be an engineer working as a surveyor, and eventually got to the stage where people were asking me so much how to help them and stuff, that I was able to make that transition into the fitness world and do it full time. And in February there, you might not know, I actually published my own book on nutrition and training as well. and
Oh, cool.
via the KDP platform as
Hmm.
well. So I've noticed your book up there, and we've been trying to give it a little bit of a run for the money. So
I'll see. I'm pulling it up right now.
you're going to pull it up now, man. So respect for all of that stuff.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's when there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of luck, but then there's just a lot that, as you know, that kind of behind the scenes to drive the whole thing.
So, as both coaches, then obviously we get a lot of questions coming through on a day-to-day basis to help people, and I can see that on your site and stuff like that. And I think you probably agree that time and time again, this classic one around carb cycling, and should people who are listening to the podcast be using it, and who's it for? And really, I wanted to kind of hash out a little bit more information on your views around that, because I touched on at the start that tradition tells us that we can only build muscle or lose fat, and never really at the same time. And
Right.
this is because we must, maintain that calorie deficit to lose fat and a calorie surplus to build muscle. But carb cycling comes along and kind of kicks this traditional approach in the teeth a little bit and says that it's that ultimate method for rapid fat loss while building muscle. So
Yeah.
it kind of goes against typical advice of fit pros and professionals like ourselves. So how about you give us maybe a little intro to carb cycling and maybe your views on how that might work?
Yeah, I mean, so just for the listeners, if they're not familiar with carb cycling, it is just reducing and increasing your carb intake, really, from a day to day. You're going to have there are many different ways to set it up, but most carb cycling methods have no carb or very, very low, like sub 20 gram days, low carb days, which would depend on your body weight. No more than 0.5 gram per pound of body weight, and then higher carb days, which could be anywhere from 1 gram to 2 grams per pound. And you cycle through these no, low, and high. And some programs drop the no carb days because they're just miserable, and it just kills compliance. Low carb is already bad enough. Like eating 50 grams of carbs a day is bad enough, but trying to do 10 a day you just don't feel very good. And where carb cycling is, where it was kind of taken from and how it kind of made it to the mainstream was from mainly from competitive bodybuilding. And I've spoken with some different guys that compete, and there's something interesting to be said for because you have for instance flexible dieting, which is very popular, and for good reason. It's the basic principles of flexible dieting are great, and that's what I espouse. Now, I think that there needs to be something in between. You have, like, on the dark side of flexible dieting, you have people that are like, they see it as an excuse of now why they can, all their carbs can just be like Pop-Tarts and Cocoa Pebbles. Mm-hmm. And they don't think of health and the nutritional value of food at all. And then you have on the other end, you have the super hardcore clean eaters that are, that have a long list of all the foods they can't eat. And it basically, like, all that's left is like fruits, vegetables, and eggs and meat or something like that. So I recommend something a bit more in the middle, which is where you're getting the majority of your calories from nutritious foods, and nutritious foods are nutrient dense foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, dairy, a lot of different foods that are that have a lot of nutrients. And then once you've kind of let's say you get 80 to 90% of your calories from nutritious foods, you can quote unquote afford to spend some calories on whatever it is that you like to. What's your indulgence? Is it cookies? Is it some ice cream? Is it for me, I mean, I like chocolate, which ironically is actually like has health value as well, but whatever, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit of, if you want to have a slice of pizza or foods that gurus would normally kind of frown upon. But I've spoken with guys that are competitive bodybuilders, and when they're dieting to get down to somewhere around, they're getting down to in many cases 4 or 5%. I mean, they're on the edge of, like, if they get leaner, then they could wind up in the hospital. And I've spoken to some guys that they compete, and they're smart, they know what they're doing, and they've said that they definitely notice a difference when they're starting to get down to 7-8%, and they need to make that that final run. That there are certain foods that just don't work well for them for the fat loss, and also they tend to hold more water, so they can't quite see where they're at, and so their diets get very clean, quote unquote, as they get very, very lean, because very, very small fluctuations in anything are noticeable. So the reason why I'm saying that is those are also guys who I've spoken with that will use carb cycling during that final run as well. And of course, they're on a ton of drugs too, and they're open about that. They don't try to pretend like they're natural. And so there seems to be something to be said for carb cycling if you are wanting to get very, very lean. And it might not be, there are genetic factors involved. I mean, this kind of goes into the whole low carb dieting craze right now as well, which for the average person, I've written about this extensively. Research shows that so long as you are eating enough protein, the amount of carbohydrates that you eat does not affect the rate at which you lose fat. You will lose body fat equally effectively on a high carb diet or a low carb diet, so long as you are eating enough protein, which would be give or take a gram per pound of body weight or 0.8 grams per pound of lean mass. So I think that there is a specialized use for carb cycling. There also are, I've written about this as well, there's some research that indicates that some people's bodies do not respond well to carbohydrate. But this is mainly in the research that I've seen on this. It's with obese people that are sedentary. So again, that doesn't exactly apply to the average person. That, let's say it's a guy that's at 15% body fat. He exercises 5 hours a week. There's nothing really wrong with his body. Like, that person does not, it's just very, very unlikely that guy, or the female version of that guy, obviously higher body fat, but that they're going to have any problem with insulin response or insulin sensitivity. Their bodies are going to do just fine with carbs. So where that kind of makes carb cycling fall apart is the whole premise of carb cycling is that on your low carb days, you burn all this fat, and then on the high carb days, you build all this muscle. That's just not how it works. The low carb days, they don't help you burn more fat. Weight loss, remember, is not, I mean, you know this, but just for the listeners, that the goal isn't to lose weight. If you want to just lose weight, yeah, low carb dieting is the way to go, because your body's going to flush water and glycogen. We know that. There's research on it. There's no question. And you can experience it anecdotally. You just cut your carbs in half, but increase your fats to make up for the calories, and you will lose weight because your body's going to be holding less water. But who cares about that? That's not what we want. We want to lose fat. And yeah, holding less water is going to make you look a little bit better depending on how lean you are. Like, I stay pretty lean year round. I stay maybe around 8% and then get down to 6 or 7% if I have to do a photo shoot or something like that. And so at this body fat percentage, if I cut my carbs to 100 grams a day or 150 grams, 120 grams a day for a week, yes, I look noticeably leaner because I'm reducing my water, the subcutaneous water. But I'm not losing more fat. And so that's the first thing that a lot of people don't understand about carb cycling is those low carb days, which suck. And you do not, I mean, I don't know anybody that says they like their low carb, no carb days, because you just have a lot of people, they struggle with low energy. They struggle with hunger. They struggle with cravings. You're not losing more fat. And it's just, there's no way to hack energy, your metabolism or energy balance. Building muscle, the reason why, like, you want to lose fat, the first thing you have to do is be in a calorie deficit. You have to be eating fewer calories than you're burning. There's no way around that. So when you are doing that, yes, you can build muscle in a calorie deficit, but not everybody can. Where you can be sure you can is if you're new to weightlifting. If you've never lifted weights before and you need to lose fat, you will build, if you have even if you have a shit program, you're still going to build muscle, some muscle at least, while you're in a calorie deficit. But once your newbie gains are gone, in a sense, once maybe your first 6 to 8 months of weightlifting are behind you, and you've built some muscle and you've built some strength, now the problem is calorie deficit means more or less no muscle growth, because when you're in a calorie deficit, your body's ability to synthesize proteins is impaired. This has been shown in research. And muscle growth, really, when you look at it scientifically, it's just the amount you have on one side of an equation, or you have one side of a scale, I guess you could say, would be the amount of proteins that your body has synthesized over 24 hours, let's say. And on the other side, you have protein degradation, how many proteins were damaged and broken down in the gym and just in day-to-day, your cells are always turning over. And when you're in a calorie deficit, your body's ability to synthesize proteins is impaired. So and it's just what we know anecdotally how that plays out is experienced weightlifters simply cannot build any muscle to speak of when they're in a calorie deficit, because that impaired protein synthesis is just significant enough to kind of, your goal is to balance that scale. You're just trying to make sure the degradation rate doesn't exceed the synthesis rate. So it doesn't matter if you're going to be losing fat, you're going to be in a calorie deficit. And if you are gonna, if you're in a calorie deficit, let's say 2 days, only 2 days of the week, you're not going to lose very much fat. If you're in a deficit, 2 days of the week and then 5 days you're eating around maintenance level, for instance, you're not going to lose much fat. It's going to be very slow going. If you ate on those 5 days a bit more, whereas if you're in a surplus, and that's the traditional type of bulking, quote unquote, in the world of bodybuilding. The reason why you're placing your body in a slight calorie surplus is because you want to make sure you're not in a deficit. You want to make sure that your protein synthesis rates are as high as they can be. And you accomplish that. One of the ways you accomplish that is with food and by simply giving your body enough energy. Now, I mean, there'd be no way to do this outside of a lab, obviously, or I mean, it's impractical to, like, ideally, you could probably be like in a 5% surplus or a very, very minor surplus, and you would gain the minimal amount of fat and still be able to gain the maximum amount of muscle. But practically speaking, you have to overshoot it a little bit and learn your body's ranges, essentially. And you have to be, when you want to put on muscle, you have to just deal with a little bit of fat gain that goes with it. In my experience, I've seen that most guys probably gain muscle and fat at a 1-to-1 ratio. If guys can gain more muscle than fat, then from what I've seen, it's probably more a genetic thing. Some guys genetically just tend to stay leaner than others. And whatever, they're assholes. But so you have these two kind of, these things are mutually exclusive. You can't, you can't lose fat in a calorie surplus, and you can build muscle in a calorie deficit, but only for so long. So, it's kind of like recomp. I've written about it, over on my blog, on my Muscle for Life blog and Legion blog, because it's just such a trendy thing. For guys that want to recomp, if you're new to weightlifting, or if you're new to proper weightlifting, like if you've never done a heavy squat or deadlift before, for instance, if you've always just done what I used to do, a bunch of isolation stuff and high rep, and you may be able to, because your body's it's going to be quite a different experience if you started training properly. And I have seen guys that have already had a couple years of weightlifting under their belts, but improper kind of crappy weightlifting programs, and then they switched over to something like my program or starting strength or 5x5 or whatever, and then see a nice boost in muscle growth while they lose fat. But there's nothing really special to it. It's just, if you want to recomp, put your body in a calorie deficit, let's say a moderate calorie deficit, 20% calorie deficit, and get in the gym and train correctly. And if your body's able to recomp at all, it's going to happen. If you're too experienced of a weightlifter, it's not going to happen. And if that's the case, if you're too experienced of a weightlifter, if your it's just a point where, because the newbie gains in the beginning are almost like comparable to steroids in terms of results. Like if you take somebody, an experienced weightlifter, and put them on steroids, and you took somebody brand new to weightlifting, that's similar, because like someone brand new to weightlifting can gain 20, like a guy could gain 20-ish pounds of muscle in a year. And then you take an experienced weightlifter, and there's no way, natural weightlifter that has a couple years of weightlifting under his belt, it's impossible to gain 20 pounds in a year, but you put him on drugs and he can gain 20 pounds a year. So, basically in the beginning, your body is so hyper responsive to the weightlifting that you can, the detriment or the impairment that comes with the calorie deficit gets negated, or it just doesn't matter, because you have your synthesis rates are so high that your body just kind of blows through it, and you still gain weight or you still gain muscle, but you gain less muscle. Like I've seen quite a few guys come and start like my program quite overweight, needing to lose anywhere from 30 to 50 plus pounds. And over the course of the first year, losing all the weight that they need to lose, getting down to, the 10% range where you start to look good, and gaining anywhere from 12 to 17 pounds of muscle, that's impressive. To gain, even gain 10 pounds of muscle and lose 30 to 40 pounds of fat in a year is really, really good. I mean, that's like, it's not like an outlier. It's not freak results. So that means like that's good compliance. They stuck with the program. They didn't miss workouts. They stuck to their diet. They did it right. So that's why, just coming back to carb cycling, the promise, it just can't live up to the promise. And you don't get extra fat loss benefits when your carbs are low. And ironically, higher carbs are better for muscle growth. You're going to, with a higher carb diet, you're going to be able to train harder in the gym. Your workouts are just going to be better. And also there are the insulin effects, and that, and this has of course been shown in research, that the more carbs your diet contains, the higher insulin levels are in general. And I know these days that's considered a bad thing. And, insulin equals fat. Well, that's impossible. Your body to gain for your total fat mass to increase, that means that your body's energy stores are increasing. Where is it going to get that energy from? Insulin can't break, this is just the first law of thermodynamics. Insulin doesn't create energy and then store it as fat. Insulin drives nutrients from the blood into the cells. So if you're providing your body with an excess of energy, then it will store a portion of that. But insulin itself doesn't cause weight gain. And ironically, insulin, it's not anabolic like testosterone, but it's anti-catabolic, meaning that it doesn't affect the protein synthesis side of the scale, but it does affect the protein degradation side of the scale, lowers protein degradation rates. Now, it doesn't, like, when guys like testosterone, for instance, just the hormone is a very anabolic hormone because it jacks up protein synthesis rates much more than insulin suppresses protein degradation rates. But insulin is a powerful anti-catabolic agent. So, and there's research on this, I've written about this as well, that just show that higher carb diets result in less muscle breakdown over time and more muscle growth over time. And of course, more strength in the gym. I mean, that you can just experience for yourself, real quickly. So, the high carb days on carb cycling, good idea. Low carb days, worthless. There's no point to do it. And in the end, what it all boils down to anyway is this energy balance point, and you have to look at your total energy intake over the entire week. We can just look at it a week and say, if we could know exactly a number, you burned 82,000 calories in a week. I don't care how you broke that up in terms of high carb day, low carb day, this, that, whatever, meal frequency, IF, eating every 2 hours. If you eat 83,000 calories in that week, you are not going to lose fat, period. You may not gain fat because that kind of depends on, that's not a lot of calories over, and it depends where those calories came from. It depends how your body deals with excess calories. But if you ate 90,000 calories, you're going to gain some fat, period. I don't care who you are. If you ate 81,000 calories, maybe lose a little bit of fat. If you ate 75,000 calories, you're going to have lost, maybe a pound and a half of fat or whatever it is. I memean, obviously there's the whole fat has 3,500, pound of fat has 3,500 calories, but that's not an exact science per se. So when you're looking at the overall picture, you still just have to be in a deficit. And if you can build muscle while in a deficit, it's going to happen. There's really nothing you can do to hack that beyond drugging.
Dude, you've just smashed it.
I've had the question a lot.
I know, I could tell. You could have told me. I would have went and had a cup of tea and had a bath. Come back in half an hour.
I know. Sometimes my hardest thing when I'm on my podcast, is just not talking, just sitting there. I should just mute my mic sometimes just to shut myself up.
No, man, I can tell that you're passionate about it, and you've got, you've done your research on it there as well. So I completely agree. And that's one of the key reasons I wanted to get you on the podcast, so we could hash that out, or you could at least hash that out, your side of things. So it's fantastic to hear, man. So really, let me try and summarize all of this information that you've just put out, which has been great. I suppose it's therefore appears that the micromanaging details of many of these like carb cycling protocols doesn't result in enhanced benefits over traditional calorie controlled diets. Agree?
Exactly.
All right.
And you could say macronutrient control, because obviously, I mean, we know that a calorie isn't a calorie when we're talking body composition. I mean, you don't want to be eating, like the standard kind of RDI of protein when you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose muscle. So, but yeah, exactly. That, like, just, if we look at dieting in terms of a hierarchy of importance, we have energy balance at the top, which is what you're talking about, the calories in versus the calories expended. And then we have the macronutrient balance, which is, okay, so where do those calories come from? How much from protein, carbs, and fat? And then we have the food choices are lower in importance and priority. What you eat isn't, when we're talking body composition, isn't as important as how much you eat and how it breaks down into these macronutrients. With the caveat of, like I was saying, micronutrients do matter. Eat nutritious foods. Get the majority of your calories from relatively unprocessed foods that you prepare yourself, and you're going to be good. And then, have little indulgences and just work it into your numbers, basically. And then at the bottom of the hierarchy would be nutrient timing. When you eat isn't very important. There's a fair amount of research to show that having some protein before and after weightlifting workouts makes sense, and having some carbs after weightlifting makes sense. Not so much for the glycogen replenishment. I mean, there is that, but that's more important if you're going to be working out or doing something, physically intense several hours later, you're going to want to replenish, but also just for like that, the insulin, the anti-catabolic effect. And it's a minor point, but, it can make a difference over a longer period of time. So there's no reason not to do it. It's not like usually when you're done working out, eating some food feels good anyway. So, you might as well. But, so if you just kind of stick within that framework and ignore the fancier a diet sounds, the more likely it's bullshit. And, the only like exception to that, I would say, is intermittent fasting. Not that it's like in terms of, again, it doesn't deliver. I guess it's similar to carb cycling. It's not the recomp. It's not the master of the recomp. But some people do like eating on that schedule. Some people, they just don't like breakfast. So they enjoy skipping breakfast and they like eating bigger meals. I'm not a big fan of it because I have to eat, like if my average daily intake is maybe 2,800 calories, maybe as high as 3,000, usually not higher than that if I'm maintaining. And I don't like having to jam that into 3 meals, let's say, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
That's just a personal preference.
No, I agree completely with everything you're saying. Really, from a body composition or weight management type client, that this is what we need to focus on. And from my own experience, it appears to be the case as well, mate. Because I've been able to get myself and clients equally lean without the need to use a carb cycling protocol. On paper, it makes sense, right? We all kind of want to believe that this is, the holy grail approach, but there's little research to support it, like you've just covered there, and it appears to be making this whole process more complicated than it actually needs to be. So, and
that's a problem because compliance and accuracy are the 2 most important factors when you're dieting. As long as your diet makes some sense, if it just sticks to the basics that we've kind of covered here, now it comes down to you being accurate, meaning not underestimating intake. And like you work with people, so the common mistakes of their cup of oatmeal is actually like 30% more grain than it should be if you were to measure it by grams and stuff. So just inaccuracies and not recording intake properly, or forgetting the condiments and forgetting the half and half that went in the coffee and all those little things that add up, taking a couple extra bites at dinner and all that. And so, and then compliance, just sticking to it. And the more complicated a diet is, the less likely you are to stick to it. And also the less likely, in my opinion, I like to try to instill in people the idea that this should be a lifestyle. This should be like, we want to install some habits, some healthy habits that you can be doing for the rest of your life and that you can actually enjoy, not have to brainwash yourself that you enjoy and, try to tell yourself that you like restricting your food to 3 different types of foods, and that, you have to be constantly tweaking your spreadsheets to know what you're supposed to eat today. I don't know. I don't very many people there aren't very many people that are just instinctively drawn to that type of lifestyle.
Yeah, I get what you completely mean there. And carb cycling protocols can be even more restrictive than those traditional approaches like calorie counting, when people sometimes freak out they've got to, track their calories or add their macros. But having a low or no carb day is equally different, or well more, a lot more difficult, and can leave many people with those increased cravings. And therefore, ultimately, like you've just touched on, Mike, is that leading to reduced dietary compliance ultimately. So I think that's
also a good point actually to bring up, is that if a lot of diets that are kind of mainstream that want to avoid any sort of quantities, they don't want to, because people get turned off by having to count or track, that the only reason why they work, it goes back to what I was talking about, just so the listener is clear on that a calorie deficit is a calorie deficit. That's what you need to lose fat. How you get there, whether you track it, plan it, or just get there by restricting your food intake heavily. That's why food restriction diets work. It's not because there's anything inherently magical about those diets, or that there's anything inherently bad about the foods that you're restricting. There's no such thing as a weight loss food, or a food that is detrimental to weight loss. There are foods that are more conducive to weight loss because they are, lower in calorie density and higher in satiety. But and then that's kind of an allure of carb cycling to some people, is that they're told they don't have to track. All they have to do is eat no carbs. So they just know all they can eat is some vegetables or something like that on this day. And then they can eat a few handfuls of carbs, or, it's a fake way to simplify something that's already kind of unnecessarily complex, when you could just scrap all that and make yourself a meal plan with foods you like, eat every few hours. That's just because most people like it. I mean, that's what I recommend for most people, because unless they explicitly say, oh, I only like to eat 3 meals a day, I'm going to assume that they like to have a little bit of food every few hours because it just keeps your blood sugar level stable. And I don't know, there's even a mental, like a psychological benefit to it, I think, of just having some food every few hours. And make a meal plan, hit your numbers, eat the same foods every day until you get sick of something and swap it out, and do that every day until you reach your goal, and then reverse diet up and then maintain or go into a surplus or do whatever you want from there. But it just, that's all you really need to do.
Yes, mate. I love it. It's fantastic to, have a bit of a revision of that information that I've probably spoke about on the podcast before. And, it's nice to have it reiterated a little bit, and other guys are good coaches as well, promoting it as well. So thanks very much, man. I think we've pretty much put that one to bed, right?
Cool. I don't know what else to say on that.
We've debunked it pretty successfully. So no, it's been great, man. And just for the listeners tuning in, that I agree with this, and I agree with a lot of everything that you've said there. And I definitely tend to fall for that traditional approach more so than getting caught up. Although I have done personally as well in the past and things like that. But I think
I've tried it. I mean, sure, I've tried it just for the sake of trying it. But then after trying it, and then, going, and because I know personally what does it take to get really lean on a traditional diet. And then, so I've tried, IF, I've tried carb cycling, and it's just kind of played out exactly as we've just talked about, where I was just like, well, the experience was worse and the results were the same. So.
Sure. Mike, let's wrap it up, buddy. Where can the guys and girls tuned in find out more about you and what you do?
My website, Muscle for Life, is really the best place to go. It's muscleforlife.com. And it's kind of like a glorified blog almost, but it's pretty big. Like I get over 1 million visits a month, and I spend a lot of time engaging with everybody and answering questions, and all my books are up there, and I have a line of workout supplements as well, which that company also, we're really kind of expanding into apparel and stuff. We're going to be doing more than just supplements, but the name of that is Legion Athletics. But again, you'll find everything at Muscle for Life, and if you like what I'm talking about, then you'll probably like my articles and my books and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's well worth a visit. That's where I found you, mate, and got some great content. So yeah, worth checking out. Yeah, thanks, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, I'll speak to you soon. See you in a bit.
Okay.